Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. Thanks for joining us. We are live. We are going to talk through a very exciting Super Bowl matchup. First of all, Tom, how you doing?
Doing great, man. This is it. Last game of the season. It's been a long season, particularly the amount of content that we've been putting out there. So kind of glad in some ways to get to the end of it and start digging into the rookies, start digging into best ball data. But yeah, it just looks like a great game on paper, really hoping that it delivers.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? 22 weeks ago, this all started and it's coming to a culmination finally. Look, let's start with the main event. We can talk about a lot of things about the Super Bowl. Let's start quarterbacks. Let's start the best quarterback in the league. Currently injured. Do we think that his health matters? Do we think that he's potentially fully good to go?
I think so. I think the 2 weeks between the conference championship game and this game is huge. That's going to be time where he can really rest up. They can work out exactly what Mahomes is capable of doing and what he's not capable of doing, and then they can tailor the game around it. His EPA per play, even when injured, has been higher than most quarterbacks are able to put up, even when they're fully healthy and in the best form of their life. So I'm not too worried. I mean, he passes for over 300 passing yards per game, which is just a ludicrous amount and really big on DraftKings. If you play in DFS, you get those 3 points bonus whenever somebody goes over 300 passing yards. But it will be a tough matchup because the Eagles' defense is first in DVOA against the pass. So it's quite hard to predict, but I don't think we need to worry too much about Mahomes.
Yeah, he's incredibly exciting. I think even if you take his legs away and said he's just got to sit in the pocket, he's still probably better than 80% of the quarterbacks in the league, quite frankly, isn't he? Let's move across to the receivers. There's a lot to be said about the Chiefs receivers. Obviously, they moved out Tyreek Hill in the offseason. They kind of spread those resources across 4 guys. We've got the values there on screen. They seem to all be injured this week. Is there anyone that you particularly love? Anyone that you think is going to be the key kind of play for the Chiefs this week?
Yeah, I mean, just zooming out a little bit, I heard somebody earlier today refer to the Chiefs' approach this year. It's been like Moneyball, where they couldn't replace Tyreek Hill, so they looked for wide receivers who could get on base, and that's just kind of it. They've just mashed together a bunch of receivers who've been able to do enough to keep their production going. The Chiefs, I mean, they're really good against the pass, as we just mentioned. They rank number 2 against wide receiver 1s, and they're 4th against wide receiver 2s. Their only real vulnerability is probably in the slot. So that's an area where Juju Smith-Schuster runs 44% of his routes. I mean, he'll likely be a player who's not at the top of people's lists because he's had 4 games in a row with less than 6 points. But this year, he's averaged 5.7 targets per game and 53.8 yards. So it is worth remembering that. I think if you're looking at MVS, you kind of have to just think about the fact that a lot of people seem to think that MVS can still break loose for these big, long touchdowns, but the Chiefs have scored 83% of their touchdowns this season inside the red zone. They've just marched up and down the field, and then when we get to the red zone, occasionally it goes to MVS, occasionally it goes to Juju, but more than likely it's going to Travis Kelce.
Yeah, MVS is appealing, isn't he? But when you say that he's the highest priced of any of these Chiefs wide receivers, that turns me off immediately. That's a little bit scary. I think it's largely, Juju's obviously got this knee injury. He's currently still yet to practice. Kadarius Toney's got this ankle and potential hamstring injury. He's yet to practice. Could it potentially be Sky Moore breakout week, or is that fully put to bed?
I struggle with Sky Moore because we saw it last week. I think he had 11 targets, and even then he wasn't really able to do an awful lot with it. Let me just pull this up here. So yeah, last week he had 11 targets and wasn't able to turn it into anything fantasy relevant. So this season, 1 top 48 finish. I just struggle to believe that he's really going to be able to turn it on against the Eagles' pass defense, who are fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that this is the week. So the Chiefs are the 4th most pass-heavy team in the league. They passed on 61% of dropbacks. Do we think that the Eagles' number 1 pass defense, they could potentially be run on? Do we think this could be a Isaiah Pacheco week?
I think Yeah, I'd kind of lean towards him over Jarrett McKinnon. Now, the Eagles ranked 21st against the run in DVOA, but since week 13, they've got the 8th best rush defense in that metric. So that metric's kind of getting a little overblown at times. They saw they had a weakness and we brought in guys to, to solidify that up. So I'm not desperate to play these guys. But we have seen with McKinnon and Pacheco, it looked like down the back end of the fantasy regular season that McKinnon was the player they trusted more. He was on the field constantly. He was in pass protection all the time. But since then, it's swung back to Pacheco. And you can see on screen there, 62 touches for Pacheco to McKinnon's 36 since week 16. The only downside is neither of these running backs particularly put up an awful lot of fantasy points. So if you're looking at this from a fantasy perspective, can you get more than 10, 12 points out of either of them? I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, but I think you saying about since week 13, I think that's the week that Jordan Davis came back from his injury, which is obviously the rookie nose tackle for the Eagles, who's been fantastic when on the field. They went out and signed Ndamukong Suh, who's been average, we say, but Linval Joseph, they also brought in, who's been fantastic. I think the Eagles having Linval Joseph and Jordan Davis that they can rotate in is potentially big for them. I do think I'm picking Isaiah Pacheco as my X factor for this game. I think that if he has a big game, I think the Chiefs, with the injuries in the wide receiver room, are going to need to run the ball more. And I think they're going to want to try and control the clock. And I think that if he can have a competent game, maybe 70, 80 yards and a touchdown, I think that he's going to help the Chiefs to continue to move those chains and run the ball to control the clock and control the game. And so for me, I don't think that he has to have a good game for the Chiefs to play well, but I think if he does have a good game, I think that means the Chiefs are playing well, if that makes sense.
Do you have any kind of pause? We just saw before we came on that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been activated from IR. It didn't really feel like the Chiefs necessarily wanted to do that, but with McCole Hardman needing to go on IR, they had the roster spot free. Do you think there's any way that Clyde Edwards-Helaire takes meaningful snaps in this game?
No. I think that, look, if you've got a guy that you've basically not trusted all year, he then got injured, this is the biggest game of the season. Are the Chiefs going to trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's not been on the field for, I think it's 9 weeks?
It was week 11, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't trust him. There's no way that I can believe that he's going to get significant work. Yeah, he'll probably get a couple of touches. He'll probably come on. But I still think this is Pacheco, McKinnon, and I think Edwards-Helaire is going to be an afterthought as a third option.
I think, and it's important to kind of look back, and you go back to when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was playing. They were phasing him out then. His last 5 games, he went 41% of snaps, 26% of snaps, 17% of snaps, 6.3, and then 7.7. The Chiefs don't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah. Well, we're 8 minutes into talking about the Chiefs, and I can't believe we've not mentioned Travis Kelce, Tom.
Yeah,
he's a cheat code. We need to discuss.
Yeah, and this is possibly one of the toughest defenses that he's going to have faced all season. But the way that Travis Kelce plays, the fact that he has that license to get open and to run routes as he sees fit, that's it. Just you can't bet against that. 56.6 DraftKings points in his last 2 games is just, for a non-quarterback, is just a crazy amount. He's got the highest non-quarterback average of any player playing this weekend, and across his career, 15 touchdowns in 17 games. I do think that the Eagles are going to give him a tough time. I think they rank 6th best against the position, so it's not a gimme in any means. But yeah, I just think that this game either swings in Kelce's favor, or if you're looking for somebody who's lower rostered, if you're looking at prop lines in terms of receiving lines, or if you're looking at somebody for a captain choice for DFS showdowns who will be less rostered, because everyone's going to want to play Kelce. Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot. It's an area which the Eagles have struggled against. I mean, they allow the 14th most fantasy points to opposing slot receivers, so they've not been good against it, but when you look at the rest of their matchups, they're good everywhere. So perhaps Juju could be the key to the Chiefs managing to just move the offense more and more.
Yeah, potentially. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So our friends over at Run the Sims are running a free promo this week, and you can head over there and use all their tools for free this week. So if you are playing DFS Showdown, or if you just want to check out prop bet lines, head over there. You can sign up for a free account. Use the code Sanctuary when you sign up, and if you decide that you want to keep playing through the off season, they've also got projections coming for XFL and the USFL. And again, if you use the code Sanctuary for that, you'll save 10% when you sign up.
I have to say, I think this is the first off season where I'm looking forward to more football. So yeah, I'm quite keen to see the XFL and the USFL. It's rare that we get 2 spring leagues. So moving across to the Eagles, okay, let's start with Jalen Hurts. Okay, he's not seemed healthy since coming back from his injury. I know we came back last week the regular season. He's been playing for a few weeks. He's not looked fully healthy. Do you think we can kind of bank on him being the Jalen Hurts we saw through the first 14 games of the season?
It really looks like the shoulder is bothering him to an extent. That's the injury that kept him out for a couple of games. And then when he came back and he said that he was playing through pain, and he might not be showing up on the injury report, but you can see it in his play. He's not going deep in the same way that he was. His EPA on sideline throws has dropped slightly. And I just think that it is a problem for him to an extent, and I would imagine that the Chiefs probably pick up on that too. So, yeah, I do think though he's somebody like you can see there on screen. We've got a lot of sites having projected for the highest ownership across any place. He scored so many rushing touchdowns this season that Jalen Hurts can put up good fantasy numbers even without doing that. He's just an absolute cheat code at the position. And even if he's not entirely healthy throwing the ball, he seemed quite happy running the ball or doing goal line, sneaks and stuff like that. So I'm not sure that the Chiefs can stop him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you touched on running the ball. I think for me, I wonder if the Chiefs are going to sell out to stop the run. So Jalen Hurts, with 8 men in the box, averages 2.1 yards per carry. With 7 or fewer men, he's averaging 6.3. Miles Sanders, with 8 men in the box, he's averaging 3 yards a carry. With 7 or fewer, he's averaging 5.5. I wonder if there's a world where it would be crazy if the Chiefs did this, but I wonder if the Chiefs are going to go, right, we're going to load the box. You've got to beat us with your arm. We don't think you can throw the ball downfield. And I wonder if we're not going to see it every down, but I wonder if on a couple of those key, third and short plays that we'll see in the first quarter, I wonder if the Chiefs are just going to load the box and see if you can beat us outside.
Do you think they've got the personnel to be able to do that? That's something I kind of go back to. I'm just like, they rank 15th against the run in DVOA, and I'm just not sure.
They've got 3 corners that aren't elite but are good. They also lead the league in terms of snaps run of press coverage. And I wonder, that almost goes hand in hand of, right, we're going to get up, we're going to play press man, we're going to load the box, and you have really got to put the ball high and outside and basically say to Jalen Hurts, you've got to win the game with your arm. And don't get me wrong, it could completely blow up in the Chiefs' face. And I wonder if they maybe play it a little bit safer. But I think there is a slight blueprint there to say, look, Jalen Hurts, you have got to throw the ball to win this.
Yeah, I mean, and I definitely have no problem playing Miles Sanders this week. I think you can definitely look at his prop lines. You can look at his stats, and yeah, he set career highs in rushing yards this year, rushing attempts, touchdowns, missed tackle percentage. He popped in loads of efficiency metrics, which isn't something we'd necessarily associate with him. Meanwhile, Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, they're the kind of players who people are going to look at for DFS purposes as salary relief, because Kenneth Gainwell's 5,000, Boston Scott's 3,000. But neither averages more than 4 attempts per game, where Sanders averages 15.1. Sanders averages 73.7 yards per game and 0.68 touchdowns. And the thing with the Chiefs defense as well, they've allowed 6 rushing touchdowns to running backs in the last 5 games. So I do feel like there's a good position to take there on Miles Sanders. And Gainwell might attract some attention because in the last game he had like 20 points or so, and he had 14 attempts against the Niners. But those games, they weren't really telling. They weren't, against the Giants and against the Niners, there weren't situations where the Eagles were really being pushed to their most. And I'd be surprised if Kenneth Gainwell scored more than 5 or 6 points. And Boston Scott, he's only had 2 double-digit games this season, and both came against the Giants when he had touchdowns. I think those are real trap plays. And if I'm playing any running back from the Eagles, it would be Miles Sanders.
So last year or 2 years ago, we had playoff Lenny. So you're not a believer in playoff Kenny?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not.
So let's look at the wide receivers. There's going to be a lot of people in and ahhing which way to go. You've got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Do you fall either side of the coin at the moment?
Yeah, I'm big on AJ Brown this week. The Chiefs rank 31st against wide receiver ones in Football Outsiders metric. They give up an average of 81 yards to opposing wide receiver ones. AJ Brown's receiving line on Sky Bet at the minute is set at 71.5. I think that's a great bet to have. I don't have a problem with Devonta Smith at all. I just think this sets up better for AJ Brown. I think if Jalen Hurts is struggling throwing the ball downfield into those kind of outside the numbers games, then AJ Brown, we've seen him be used near the line of scrimmage sometimes as well as downfield. And I just have to believe that even though AJ Brown's in the worst form of this season, with like 7 catches for 50 scoreless yards, that this is the kind of matchup where he can completely break that open. In terms of Devonta Smith, the Chiefs rank 8th against wide receiver twos. Devonta Smith is as good as any wide receiver 2 in the league, though. So I do think he can really challenge the Chiefs cornerbacks and give them trouble. But yeah, I think if I'm paying up for either of these, it would be AJ Brown. And I'll probably have several DFS lineups where I'm captaining AJ Brown. And I think, you can look at any kind of betting markets and lean into AJ Brown on them.
Yeah, I think for me, I think AJ Brown's going to be the biggest question mark, the biggest kind of X factor in this Eagles offense. And basically, if they believe and if they are able to potentially the Chiefs stop the run and load that box and force Jalen Hurts to pass the ball, I think it's going to be, getting the ball in AJ Brown's hands and trying to kind of let him basically go kind of after the catch and perform from there. Over at the time,
just quickly, I'll just touch on the other wide receivers, because if you are playing showdown slates, or we see it sometimes that players come out of nowhere on Super Bowls to really make an impact. I'm just not sure Quez Watkins or Zach Pascal are really those players to do so. I mean, Zach Pascal averages 2.0 points per game, with Watkins averaging 4.5. I think if I was going to have to choose one of those for salary relief on DK this weekend, then I would go with Watkins. I think, you can maybe take prop bets at them receiving lines being sort of like on the over if you are believing that it's going to be a pass heavy attack. But if you think it's going to be a run heavy attack, then yeah, stay away from them and just stick with the main targets.
And then finally, tight end position, Dallas Goedert. He's had a pretty good year when he's been healthy. Do you think he's someone that we can rely on this week?
I think so, because the way that they use Dallas Goedert is always really interesting. I mean, you see him get so many line of scrimmage screens which are set up for him, and he gets 9.6 points per game, so he's got nowhere near the ceiling that Travis Kelce has. Doesn't get the same kind of touchdowns as he's way back compared to the rest, but he gets those consistent PPR points. So if you are playing fantasy this week, that's somebody I'd be looking to. I think the Chiefs aren't particularly great against tight ends. They're not particularly bad, but they're not particularly great. So it's one of those where you can take advantage of it. At 2.7 points per touch, you're not looking for too many touches in a showdown slate to be paying off.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So matchup wise, Tom, is there a particular matchup that you think is kind of the key to this Super Bowl?
When I look at all of this matchup data, where it's the wide receivers, where it's the running backs, all that stuff, I just can't see a way which the Chiefs win this game without Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid going absolutely nuclear. I think that the Chiefs, their defense isn't as strong as the Eagles' defense. The offenses are about evenly matched. And I think if the Chiefs are going to have success, it's going to come through Chris Jones versus the Eagles' offensive line. And we're talking about one of the best defenders in the league against one of the best offensive lines in the league. per next gen stats, Jones leads all defensive tackles with 44 pressures since week 10. And he's nearly doubled his pressure rate from 6.9% in the first 9 weeks to 13.2% since week 10. So he's really coming into it. He dominated the Bengals' bad offensive line last week. He's got over 15 sacks on the season, 2 forced fumbles. And if he can get through that line and really start wrecking things at the line of scrimmage, then perhaps this can swing in the Chiefs' favor.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to look at the other side of the ball. I think for me, the Juju versus the Maddox in the slot matchup, you talked about the Eagles not being potentially great. Maddox is their slot corner. He's been battling injuries the last couple of weeks. He played in the conference title game. He's on the injury report again this week. If he's not fully fit, if Juju's not fully fit, it's a case of, hopefully they're both fully fit and we're able to go. But I think that's going to be fascinating because I think that's where you attack the Eagles. And I think that Juju could be an interesting player to watch, certainly for DFS.
Yeah, so, definitely.
In terms of setting lineups then, Tom, any suggestions you've got? Any players that you're particularly looking at in these kind of showdowns?
Yeah, these kind of 3 suggestions I've got on screen here. So Captain A.J. Brown with Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert, and really just leaning into the idea that the Eagles have to pass. When you're making showdown lineups, it's all about telling a narrative. If you're not telling a narrative, then you'll end up with conflicting players in your lineup a lot of the times. The second one, Jalen Hurts, he's going to be the most popular captain, but if you're in cash games, double ups, that's fine. You can play him there. And that's really just the absolute stars. And then you'll have to find some scrubs players like Zach Pascal, maybe even Noah Gray to be able to fit your lineup in there. And then the third one is leaning into Travis Kelce at captain, but not putting Mahomes in there, believing that, okay, Mahomes still might be slightly limited, but he's going to be able to stay in the pocket and still get Kelce 14 targets or something silly like we've seen before. So I think any of those get you off to a decent start with your lineups.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So we're going to go big screen here, Tom. I'm going to put you under pressure because I've not allowed you to prep for this. I want predictions. Who's going to win the game? What's the score going to be? And who's going to win the MVP?
I'm going to go, the Eagles are going to win the game. It's going to be 28-24. And I'm going to go A.J. Brown for MVP.
Oh, it's not going to QB.
3 touchdowns.
Wow. Okay, you heard it here first, people. I'm going to go Chiefs to win, 31-28, and Pacheco to MVP. Let's go. Let's run the ball. Let's run the ball, Chiefs. Right. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been amazing. If you're here and you haven't hit the like, what's going on? Come on, help us out. Make sure you're subscribing. But we will be back in the week. There'll be more content coming your way. And have a good one and let's enjoy a great Super Bowl.